The wind off Lake Michigan has a specific sound when you're living on the 42nd floor of a Gold Coast penthouse. It doesn't howl, it hums against the glass, a constant low-frequency vibration that reminds you that you are isolated from the rest of the world. That sound was the only company I had that night. I was 52 years old. To the outside world, to the partners at my law firm, to the young associates who feared me, and to the relentless rhythm of Chicago's financial district, I was a titan. I had the view, I had the portfolio, I had the freedom. But sitting there on my Italian leather sofa, staring at the amber liquid swirling in my glass, I knew the truth. I was a hollow shell of a man. On the coffee table sat a framed photo face down. I didn't need to turn it over to know what it looked like. It was taken 10 years ago at Navy Pier. My ex-wife Linda was laughing, her hair blowing across her face. My son Leo was holding a giant pretzel, and my daughter Sophie was sitting on my shoulders. We looked like a family. We looked unbreakable. Now the silence in the apartment was deafening. The divorce had been finalized 6 months ago, but the emotional separation had started years before that. I had convinced myself that I was doing it all for them. The late nights, the missed recitals, the weekends spent answering emails instead of coaching Little League. I told myself I was building a legacy. I was providing. I was wrong. I wasn't providing, I was hiding. I took a sip of the scotch, but it tasted like ash. My chest felt tight. I rubbed my sternum, assuming it was just the stress, or maybe the indigestion from another takeout dinner eaten alone. I stood up to walk to the window, looking out at the grid of light stretching endlessly toward the west. Somewhere out there in a suburban house I used to pay the mortgage on, but was no longer welcome in, my children were sleeping. Did they miss me, or was my absence a relief? The thought hit me harder than the physical pain. It was a sharp, jagged realization that I had become a stranger to the people I claimed to love. I reached for my phone to send a text, maybe to Linda, maybe to Leo, just to say something, anything, but my fingers wouldn't work. The phone slipped from my hand and clattered onto the hardwood floor. I tried to bend down to pick it up, but the room suddenly tilted violently to the left. Then came the pressure. It wasn't like the movies. There was no dramatic clutching of the arm, no cinematic gasp. It felt as if an invisible elephant had stepped directly onto the center of my chest. The air in the room instantly vanished. I tried to inhale, but my lungs were paralyzed, pinned down by a crushing weight. Panic, cold and primal, flooded my system. Not now, I thought, not like this, not alone. I stumbled, my knees giving way, and I crashed onto the rug. The hum of the wind against the glass grew louder, transforming into a roar. My vision began to tunnel. The lights of the Chicago skyline blurred into streaks of gold and red, spinning faster and faster. I could hear my own heart, a frantic, erratic drumming in my ears, and then suddenly a terrifying skip, then silence. The pain vanished, replaced by a numbing cold that started in my fingertips and raced toward my core. I tried to yell for help, but no sound came out. I was trapped inside a body that was shutting down, room by room, switch by switch. The last thing I saw was the face-down photo on the coffee table. I never got to turn it over. I never got to say sorry. And then the world went black. The first thing I noticed was the silence. It wasn't the quiet of an empty room or the hushed stillness of a library. It was absolute. The humming of the wind against the glass had stopped. The erratic thumping of my heart was gone. The crushing pressure on my chest, the invisible elephant, had simply stepped off. I felt lighter than air. In fact, I felt like nothing. I opened my eyes, expecting to see the ceiling of my living room, perhaps the intricate crown molding I had paid a contractor a fortune to install. Instead, I was looking down. I was floating near the chandelier. Below me, sprawled awkwardly on the Persian rug, was a man. He looked older than I remembered being. His skin was a waxy, greyish tone, and his mouth was slightly open in a silent gasp. He wore my shirt, my watch, and he lay next to my spilled scotch. It took a moment for the realization to wash over me, calm and detached. That is my body, and I am no longer in it. I watched, fascinated and horrified as the scene unfolded with a strange fluid distortion of time. The heavy oak door of my apartment burst open. I didn't hear the sound of the wood splintering, but I saw the vibration of it. 2 paramedics in navy blue uniforms rushed in, followed by the building's night doorman. A guy named Carl, who I usually ignored. Carl looked terrified, his hands shaking as he pointed at my body. One of the paramedics, a woman with a tight ponytail and focused eyes, dropped to her knees beside my shell. She ripped open my dress shirt, buttons scattering across the floor like pearls, and pressed her ear to my chest. "No pulse," she said. I didn't hear her voice with my ears. I heard it inside my mind, telepathic and clear. "Start compressions, get the pads." I watched as the male partner began to pump my chest. The violence of it was shocking. Crack, crack. I could sense my ribs giving way under the force, but I felt no pain. I only felt a mild curiosity, like I was watching a medical drama on TV with the volume muted. "Stop," I wanted to say. "It's okay, I'm not there." I tried to float down, to tap the woman on the shoulder and tell her to save her energy, but my hand passed right through her. I was smoke. I was a memory. Suddenly a strange sensation tugged at my back, a magnetic pull insistent and undeniable. I drifted higher, passing through the ceiling of the penthouse as if it were made of mist. The perspective shifted violently. I was suddenly hovering above the building. I saw the grid of Chicago laid out below me like a glittering circuit board. The ribbon of Lakeshore Drive was a stream of red tail lights and white headlights. The vast blackness of Lake Michigan swallowed the horizon to the east. It was beautiful, it was cold, and it was incredibly lonely. As I rose higher, the city sounds returned, but they were different. They weren't traffic or sirens, they were thoughts. I could hear the collective hum of millions of people, worry, fear, love, exhaustion. It sounded like a choir of whispers. Then the darkness came. It wasn't the blackness of passing out. It was a velvety, living darkness. The city lights faded and I was moving fast, accelerating at an impossible speed. I wasn't afraid. The panic I had felt on the floor was gone, replaced by a sense of inevitability. I knew where I was going, even though I had never been there before. But then, a thought anchored me. A sharp hook caught in my spirit and jerked me to a halt in the void. "Leo, Sophie." The image of my children flashed in the darkness. Not the photo on the table, but a memory. Sophie crying at her graduation because I wasn't there. Leo slamming his bedroom door, yelling that I cared more about my clients than my family. Regret. It hit me harder than the heart attack. The physical pain of dying was nothing compared to the spiritual agony of leaving unfinished business. I tried to swim back, to fight the current pulling me away. I screamed into the void. "I need more time. I didn't fix it." The darkness didn't answer. Instead, it dissolved. A light appeared in the distance. Pinprick small at first, then expanding rapidly. It wasn't a blinding light like the sun. It was a soft, golden-white luminescence that felt like home. It felt like love. Pure, distilled, unconditional love. I was pulled into the center of it. The cold of the Chicago winter vanished, replaced by a warmth that permeated my very being. But as my vision cleared, I realized I wasn't alone in the light. The mist swirled and settled, revealing a room. It wasn't a hospital and it wasn't a courtroom. It looked like the living room of our old house, the one we lived in before the money, before the penthouse, before the divorce. The starter home in the suburbs, where we had been happy. And sitting in the armchair waiting for me was not God, and it wasn't an angel. It was the one person I had wronged the most. The man in the armchair stood up. He was wearing a faded grey cardigan I hadn't seen in 20 years, and the smell of pipe tobacco and peppermint filled the air. "Dad?" I whispered. My father had died 15 years ago. A quiet, hard-working man who fixed radiators for a living. We had drifted apart before he passed. He thought I was too ruthless. I thought he was too soft. Standing there now, in this replica of our old living room, he didn't look angry. He looked sad. "You built a tall tower, son," he said, his voice echoing with a resonance that shook my bones. "But you forgot the foundation." I tried to defend myself, the lawyer in me rising to the surface. "I did it for them, Dad. I paid for everything. The schools, the cars, the house." He shook his head slowly. "Money is just paper. Time is the currency of the soul, and you are bankrupt." He raised his hand and pointed toward the wall where a television used to sit. But instead of a screen, the air shimmered and tore open, revealing a three-dimensional window into the past. "Look," he commanded. "But this time don't just watch, feel." I was suddenly sucked into the vision. I was back in the kitchen of the suburban house. It was 5 years ago. I saw myself, younger, sharper, dressed in a $3,000 suit, pacing the floor, screaming into a cell phone. "I don't care what it costs, just kill the deal. I'm surrounded by idiots." Sitting at the kitchen table was my son, Leo. He was 12. He had a science fair project set up, a clumsy volcano made of papier-mâché. He was waiting for me to look at it. But I wasn't just watching the scene, I became Leo. The shift was instant and agonizing. I felt my own massive adult consciousness squeezed into the fragile, hopeful heart of a 12-year-old boy. I felt the physical sensation of Leo's stomach churning, a mix of fear and desperation. I felt the burning desire for my father, me, to just hang up the phone and say, "Good job, buddy." Then I felt the moment I, the adult me, walked right past him, grabbed a coffee and walked out the door without a glance. The pain was blinding. It wasn't a headache, it was a soul ache. I felt Leo's heart harden. I felt a cold resolve snap into place in his chest. He doesn't love me. I am a nuisance. I will stop trying. I screamed out in the void. I didn't know it hurt that much. The scene shifted instantly. I was in a dorm room. My daughter, Sophie. She was holding a phone, tears streaming down her face. It was the night she called me to say she was struggling in college, that she felt alone and scared. I remembered the call. I had told her, "Sophie, toughen up, I'm in a deposition, talk to your mother." Now I was Sophie. I felt the crushing weight of isolation. I felt the terror of the world pressing in, and the one person who was supposed to be my protector dismissing me like a telemarketer. I felt the shame of being weak. I felt the decision to look for comfort in a bottle of wine that night, and the pills she took to sleep. I felt the chemical fog wrapping around her brain, a fog I had helped create with my indifference. "Stop," I begged my father. "Please make it stop, it burns." My father stood over me. I was on my knees, weeping. Not tears of water, but tears of pure light. "You created ripples, son," he said softly. "Every time you chose work over love, every time you chose your ego over their feelings, you sent a ripple of pain through them. And now, you must feel the wave crash back." The final scene opened. It was Linda. It was the day of the divorce hearing. I remembered feeling triumphant because I had won the asset division. But now I was Linda. I felt the profound exhaustion of loving a man who was married to his ambition. I felt the humiliation of being treated like an employee being fired. I didn't want his money. I wanted the man I married back. I felt the grief of mourning a husband who was still alive. I collapsed on the floor of the spiritual living room. The arrogance, the pride, the self-justification, it was all stripped away. I saw myself for what I truly was, a success in the eyes of the bank and a total failure in the eyes of God. "I wasted it," I sobbed, clutching the hem of my father's cardigan. "I wasted all of it." My father knelt down and placed a warm hand on my head. "The book is written," he said, "but the ink is not yet dry." He looked me in the eye. "You have a choice. You can stay here in the peace and let the ripples fade, or you can go back. But if you go back, it will be the hardest thing you have ever done. You will have to rebuild the ruins without your tools." "I want to go back," I gasped. "I have to fix it." "Then breathe," he said. "Breathe and fight." He pushed me backward hard. Chapter 4, The Heavy Suit. If dying was like slipping into a warm bath, coming back was like being thrown into a meat grinder. My father's push sent me hurtling backward through the void. The golden light vanished, replaced by a rushing grey tunnel. The peace was ripped away, replaced by a terrifying sensation of gravity. Then the impact. It felt like I had been dropped from a 10-story building directly onto concrete. "Clear!" A bolt of lightning struck the center of my chest. My back arched off the floor, or was it a gurney? And every nerve ending in my body screamed at once. The silence of the afterlife was shattered by a cacophony of chaos. Beeping, shouting, the screech of rubber soles on linoleum, the roar of a siren. I tried to take a breath, but I couldn't. There was something hard and plastic jammed down my throat. I gagged, panic flaring in my brain, but my arms were strapped down. "We got a rhythm. Sinus tach rate of 130, let's move." I opened my eyes, but the world was a blur of blinding, harsh fluorescent white. Not the warm, loving light of the other side, but the sterile, stinging light of a trauma room. I was back, and it hurt. God, it hurt. My chest felt like it had been pulverized with a sledgehammer, which I later learned wasn't far from the truth given the CPR. But worse than the pain was the weight. My body felt incredibly heavy, dense and suffocating. It felt like I was wearing a lead diving suit 3 sizes too small. I wanted to go back. I wanted the peace. I wanted my dad. "Stay with us, Mr. Vance. Can you hear me?" A face loomed over me. A doctor with bloodshot eyes and a surgical mask. He shone a penlight into my eyes, sending spikes of pain into my skull. I tried to speak, to say I saw him or I'm sorry, but the tube in my throat choked me. Darkness encroached on my vision again, but this time it wasn't the spiritual void. It was just exhaustion. I slipped into a medically induced coma. Time lost its meaning. There were moments of surfacing, shadows moving in the room, the hiss of a ventilator, the smell of antiseptic and bleach, but I was mostly adrift in a dreamless black sea. When I finally woke up for real, the tube was gone. The room was dim. The rhythmic beep, beep, beep of the heart monitor was the only sound. I blinked, my eyes feeling like sandpaper. I looked around, expecting, hoping. I hoped to see Linda sleeping in the chair. I hoped to see Leo playing on his Switch in the corner. I hoped to see Sophie holding my hand. The room was empty. Just machinery. Pumps, monitors, bags of fluid hanging like plastic bats. The reality of my life before the crash hit me harder than the defibrillator. I had spent 52 years ensuring I didn't need anyone, and now I had exactly what I had built. Solitude. A nurse walked in, a large man with gentle hands. He checked the monitor and smiled sadly when he saw my eyes were open. "Welcome back to the land of the living, Mr. Vance," he said softly. "You gave us quite a scare. A massive blockage in the LAD artery. They call it the Widowmaker. Most people don't wake up from where you went." I tried to speak. My voice was a croak, a rusty hinge. "How long?" "3 days," he said. "You've been under for 3 days." "My family," I rasped. The nurse hesitated. He looked at the clipboard, then back at me. "We called the emergency contact on file, your office. A Ms. Reynolds? She said she'd notify the relevant parties." "My executive assistant, of course." "Has anyone come?" The nurse adjusted my blanket, avoiding my gaze. "You rest now. You need your strength." He didn't have to say it. No one had come. I closed my eyes, and the tears leaked out hot and stinging. In the spirit world, I had felt their pain. Now, back in the material world, I was feeling the consequence of causing it. They didn't know I had changed. To them, I was just the same workaholic tyrant who finally worked himself to death. I was alive, but I was alone. I looked at my hand trembling on the white sheet. It looked frail. The powerful lawyer was gone. "The ink is not dry," my father had said. I gritted my teeth, ignoring the fire in my chest. I had to get out of this bed. I had to get out of this hospital. I didn't care if I had to crawl. I reached for the red button on the side of the bed. I wasn't calling for a nurse to bring pain meds. I was calling for a phone. It was time to make the hardest call of my life. The phone felt like a brick in my hand. My fingers, usually so dexterous when signing million-dollar settlements, were clumsy and trembling. I dialed the number I still knew by heart, even though I had deleted it from my contacts list 6 months ago, to move on. Ring, ring, ring. "Hello?" Her voice. Linda. It wasn't the soft, welcoming voice from the beach photos. It was guarded, sharp, armor up. "It's me," I rasped. "Silence?" A long, heavy silence that stretched across the city. "We heard," she finally said. Her tone was flat, not worried, not relieved, just factual. The breath hitched in my throat. You heard?" "Your secretary emailed Leo," she said. "She said you had a cardiac event and were stable. She said you requested privacy." My grip on the phone tightened. My secretary, Reynolds. She was so efficient, so protective of the firm's image that she had framed my near-death experience as a minor inconvenience to keep the stock price stable. She had told my family I wanted privacy. "I didn't," I choked out, tears welling up again. "Linda, I didn't ask for privacy. I died. I was dead." "Robert," she sighed, the sound of exhaustion. "Don't be dramatic. You're okay. You're always okay." "I'm not," I whispered. I saw the kitchen, the volcano. I saw you crying in the courtroom. I felt it, Linda. I felt everything." "You're on medication," she said, her voice trembling slightly now, but not softening. "You're high, Robert. Go to sleep." "Let me see the kids, please." "Leo is in school. Sophie is back at campus, and frankly, they don't want to see you right now, not after what you said to Leo at Thanksgiving." The memory hit me, a jagged shard I had suppressed. Thanksgiving. I had told Leo that his art major was a waste of my investment and that if he didn't switch to business, I was cutting him off. I had crushed him. Again. "I can fix it," I pleaded. "You can't buy your way out of this one," she said. "Focus on getting better. Goodbye, Robert." The line went dead. I stared at the phone, the dial tone humming the same lonely note as the wind against my penthouse window. The NDE had given me clarity, but it hadn't given me a clean slate. I was still the villain in their story. 2 days later, I was discharged. They wheeled me to the curb. The winter air was biting, slapping my face with a brutal reality check. A black town car was waiting, sent by the firm, of course. The driver held the door open. "Good to see you up, Mr. Vance. Back to the office?" I looked at the car. The leather seats, the tinted windows, it was a hearse for the living. "No," I said, "take me home." When I walked into the penthouse, the smell hit me first. Stale air, spilled scotch that had dried into a sticky patch on the rug. The silence was absolute. I walked to the window. The view that used to make me feel like a king now made me feel like a prisoner. I was 42 stories up, trapped in a glass cage, looking down on a world I was no longer part of. I walked to the mirror in the hallway. I looked at myself, pale, gaunt, grey stubble on my chin. I looked at the eyes. They were different. The shark-like intensity was gone, replaced by a haunted, deep sorrow. "You built a tower, but you forgot the foundation." My father's words echoed in the empty hallway. I couldn't stay here. This apartment was a monument to my ego. Every piece of furniture, every award on the wall, was a testament to the time I spent away from the people who mattered. I walked into my home office. My laptop sat on the desk. I opened it. The screen glowed with 400 unread emails. Urgent, settlement offer, merger update. I didn't read a single one. Instead, I opened a new document. I typed a single line. "To the partners. I hereby resign effective immediately." I hit send. I didn't feel fear. I felt a massive, crushing weight lift off my shoulders, the same weight I had felt in the tunnel. Then I went to the bedroom and packed a single duffel bag. I didn't take the suits. I didn't take the watches. I took jeans, sweaters, and the framed photo of the family at Navy Pier. I took the elevator down to the lobby. Carl, the doorman, looked surprised to see me carrying my own bag. "Going on a trip, Mr. Vance?" "Yeah, Carl," I said, my voice quiet but steady. "I'm going to try to find my life." I walked out of the building, hailed a regular yellow cab, no town car this time, and gave the driver an address I hadn't visited in 3 years. It wasn't the suburban house. Linda had sold that. It was a small coffee shop near the university campus where Sophie went to school. I wasn't going to barge in. I wasn't going to demand. I was just going to sit and wait. I sat in the corner booth of the daily grind for 6 hours. My old self would have been furious. The Robert Vance of last week measured time in billable hours, $850 an hour to be precise. Waiting was for other people. Waiting was inefficient. But the Robert Vance who sat there now, nursing a lukewarm cup of herbal tea because his cardiologist had banned caffeine, had nowhere else to be. The coffee shop was loud. It smelled of burnt espresso and damp wool coats. Students with dark circles under their eyes were hunched over laptops, typing frantically. I watched them, and for the first time, I didn't see lazy millennials or future employees. I saw my daughter. I saw the stress I had dismissed as drama. My chest ached, a dull phantom throb where the lightning had struck me, but I stayed put. Around 4 p.m., the bell above the door jingled. A group of girls walked in laughing. Then, trailing behind them, came Sophie. My breath caught in my throat. She looked different than the last photo I had seen on Instagram. She looked thinner. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she wore a frantic, exhausted expression that mirrored the one I used to wear in the mirror every morning. She wasn't wearing the expensive coat I had bought her for Christmas. She was wearing a thrifted denim jacket that looked too thin for the Chicago wind. She walked to the counter, digging through her bag for change. I saw her count the coins. My gut twisted. I had cut off her allowance 3 months ago to teach her the value of $1. God, what had I been thinking? I stood up, my legs felt shaky. "Sophie," I said. My voice was quiet, swallowed by the noise of the espresso machine. I took a step closer and tried again, louder. "Sophie." She spun around, her eyes went wide. For a second I saw the little girl who used to run to the door when I came home, but that look vanished instantly, replaced by a wall of ice. "Dad?" She looked around as if expecting a trap. Is Mom here? Is this an intervention? No, I said, holding up my hands. It's just me. She crossed her arms, hugging her textbooks against her chest like a shield. I have a class in 20 minutes. I can't do this right now. If you're here to lecture me about my grades, just email it. I'm not here to lecture, I said. I took a deep breath. I'm here to buy you a coffee and a muffin. You look hungry. She narrowed her eyes, studying me. She noticed the grey stubble, the lack of a tie, the way I was leaning on the back of a chair for support. You look terrible, she said bluntly. I had a rough week. I managed a weak smile. Please, 5 minutes, then you can go to class and I won't bother you. She hesitated, looking at the door, then back at me. Finally, she sighed, a heavy sound for a 20-year-old. Fine, but I'm getting a latte, the large one. We sat at the small wobbly table. She drank the coffee like it was life support. I watched her, memorizing the freckles on her nose. Mom said you were sick, she said, breaking the silence. She said you were being dramatic. She froze, the cup halfway to her mouth. What? My heart stopped. For 3 minutes I was gone. She stared at me, searching for the punchline. When she saw I wasn't joking, her mask cracked. The anger wavered. You really died? Oh, yes, and I saw things. I saw you. She looked down at the table. Don't start with the spiritual stuff, Dad, please. I saw the night you called me, I continued, pressing on despite the lump in my throat. Freshman year, you were crying, you were lonely, and I told you to toughen up. Her head snapped up. Her eyes were glassy. Yeah, I remember. I felt it, Sophie, I whispered, leaning forward. Where I went, I became you. I felt how small I made you feel. I felt the coldness. I felt the pain in your chest. A tear slipped down her cheek. She angrily wiped it away. So what do you want, a medal for finally having empathy? No, I said. I want to tell you that I was wrong. I was so wrong. I thought I was building a future for you, but I was just destroying your present. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, the printout of my resignation email. I slid it across the table. She glanced at it, then her eyes widened. You resigned from the firm. I'm done, I said. I'm done with the 80-hour weeks. I'm done with the shouting. I have enough savings. I don't need to conquer the world anymore, Sophie. I just want to know my daughter. She stared at the paper, then at me. The tension in her shoulders dropped an inch. She didn't smile. That would have been too easy, too fake. But the hostility faded. You're unemployed, she said, a hint of disbelief in her voice. Robert Vance is unemployed. Retired, I corrected. There's a difference. She took a bite of the muffin, chewing slowly. I'm failing statistics, she blurted out. It was a test. The old me would have exploded. Failing after I paid that tuition? The new me just nodded. Statistics is hard. I failed Calc 2 my sophomore year. Her eyebrows shot up. You never told me that. You said you graduated summa cum laude. I lied, I said. I wanted you to think I was perfect, but I'm not. I'm really not. She looked at her watch. I have to go. Professor Miller locks the door. She stood up, gathering her things. My heart sank. Was that it? Sophie, I said, standing up with her. She paused. She looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in years. I can't fix everything, Dad, she said quietly. And I'm still mad at you, really mad. I know, I said. I deserve it. She adjusted her bag. But maybe come back next week, same time. The relief that washed over me was stronger than the morphine they had given me in the ICU. I'll be here, I promised. I'm not going anywhere. I watched her walk out into the cold Chicago afternoon. She didn't look back, but her step seemed a tiny bit lighter. I sat back down in the booth. I was exhausted, my chest hurt, and I had no job. I had never felt richer. But Sophie was the easy part. Leo was going to be the war. Leo wasn't in a coffee shop. He wasn't on a campus. Finding him required a private investigator, a favor called in from an old contact at the firm. The address led me to a converted warehouse in Logan Square. It was a gritty industrial neighborhood, miles away from the manicured lawns of the suburbs or the polished marble of the Loop. The building was covered in graffiti, and the bass from a nearby club thumped against my chest, sinking uncomfortably with my recovering heart. It was a gallery opening. Emerging Voices of Chicago. I hesitated at the rusted metal door. I was wearing a thick wool sweater and jeans, trying to blend in, but I felt like an intruder. I felt like a wolf trying to sneak into a sanctuary for sheep. I pushed the door open. The air inside was thick with the smell of cheap wine, damp concrete, and oil paint. The lighting was dim, focused entirely on the canvases hanging on the brick walls. The crowd was young, dressed in thrift store fashion, talking in hushed, reverent tones. I scanned the room, looking for my son. I found him near the back. He was talking to a girl with blue hair, using his hands to explain something with a passion I hadn't seen in him since the volcano project. He looked older than 22. He was thin, too thin, and there were dark circles under his eyes. He wore a paint-stained t-shirt that I recognized. It was an old one from a family vacation to Disney World, now tattered and grey. I didn't approach him yet. I wanted to see what he had created. I wanted to see the work I had called a waste of time. I walked over to his section of the wall. There were 3 large canvases. The first one stopped me dead in my tracks. It was titled The Provider. It wasn't a portrait of a hero, it was a nightmare. It depicted a man in a sharp black suit, but he had no face. Where the face should have been, there was just a swirling vortex of ticker tape and gold coins. The figure was sitting at a dinner table, but instead of food, the plates were full of ash. And sitting across from the faceless man was a small boy screaming, but the sound was being sucked into the man's money vortex face. I felt the blood drain from my head. I grabbed the edge of a display table to steady myself. This wasn't just art. This was an accusation. It was a scream captured in oil and acrylic. "It's $500 if you want to buy it, but I don't think it matches your decor." The voice was cold, sharp. I turned slowly. Leo was standing there, his arms crossed, his jaw set in a line of granite-hard resentment. He didn't look surprised. He looked disgusted. "Leo," I breathed. "What are you doing here, Dad?" He didn't yell. The quiet fury was worse. "Did you come to tell me the lighting is bad? Or that the margins on art are terrible? Or did you just come to tell me I'm cut off again? Because joke's on you, I'm already broke." My voice failed me. I looked back at the painting. "Is that me?" "It's an interpretation," he spat. "Go home, Dad, you don't belong here." "I didn't come to critique," I said, forcing strength into my voice. "I came to see." "You've never seen me in your life." Leo stepped closer, his voice rising, drawing the attention of a few people nearby. "You looked through me. You looked past me. You only saw a mini-you that you could mold into a hedge fund manager." "I know," I said. "I know, Leo, the volcano." Leo blinked, thrown off balance. "What?" "The volcano," I repeated, tears pricking my eyes. "Grade 6. You worked on it for 3 weeks. You used my old newspapers for the structure. You wanted to show me the chemical reaction. And I was on the phone screaming about the Henderson merger. I walked right past you." Leo stared at me. His face paled. "How do you remember that? You didn't even look at it." "I remember it now," I said, tapping my chest, "because I felt it. When my heart stopped last week, Leo, I felt it." Leo took a step back. "Mom said you had a heart attack. She said you were fine." "I wasn't fine. I died, Leo. And when I died, I didn't see a light. I saw you. I was sitting at that kitchen table inside your body. I felt your stomach turn. I felt your heart break when I walked out the door." The gallery noise seemed to fade away. It was just the 2 of us, standing in the shadow of the monstrous painting I had inspired. "I felt the moment you decided I didn't love you," I whispered. "And it was the worst pain I've ever felt in my life. Worse than the dying." Leo's lip trembled. He bit it hard, fighting for control. He looked at the painting, then at me. "You don't get to just show up and say, 'I had a dream,' and fix 18 years of damage, Dad." "I know," I said. "I'm not here to fix it today. I'm here to tell you that this—" I pointed to the terrifying painting. "This is a masterpiece. It's hideous, and it's true. And you are talented, Leo. You are so incredibly talented." Leo let out a shaky breath, a sound halfway between a laugh and a sob. "You hate it." "I hate that I am the subject," I admitted, "but I love that you painted it. I was wrong, Leo, about the business degree, about everything." I reached into my pocket. I didn't pull out a checkbook. I pulled out my wallet and took out a single crumpled card, my ID from the firm. "I resigned," I said. "The guy in that painting, he's dead. I left him in the hospital." Leo looked at the ID card, then up at my face. He saw the sweat on my forehead, the grayness of my skin. He saw the vulnerability I had never let him witness. "You really quit?" he asked, his voice small. "Walked away from all of it?" Leo ran a hand through his hair, leaving a smudge of blue paint on his forehead. He looked exhausted. The anger was still there, but the wall had a crack in it. "I'm not taking the painting down," he said stubbornly. "Good," I nodded. "Don't let it stand as a reminder." "I have a shift at the bar in 20 minutes, Leo said, checking his phone, avoiding my eyes. I can't do a father-son moment right now." "That's okay," I said. "I'll go." I turned to leave, my legs feeling like lead. I had said my piece. I had seen him. "Dad." I stopped at the heavy steel door. I turned back. Leo was standing in front of his painting, looking at the faceless monster. "If you're really retired," he mumbled, "you probably have time to help me move some canvases next week." My van broke down. It wasn't forgiveness. It was barely an olive branch. It was manual labor. I smiled, and for the first time in years it reached my eyes. "I'll rent a truck," I said. I walked out into the cold Chicago night. The wind bit at my face, but my chest felt warm. 2 down, 1 to go. But the final one was the one who knew me best. The one who had seen behind the curtain for 30 years. Linda. Linda lived in a bungalow in Evanston now. It was modest, a fraction of the size of the estate we used to own in Winnetka. But standing on the sidewalk, leaning on a cane I had bought at a pharmacy because my legs were still trembling, I saw something our old house never had. Warmth. There were flower boxes on the porch even in winter, filled with hardy evergreens. There was a wreath on the door. It looked like a home, not a museum. I knocked. My heart did that terrifying flutter it now did whenever I was nervous, a physical reminder of the wire that had almost snapped. Linda opened the door. She was wearing yoga pants and an oversized sweater, her hair pulled back in a clip. She looked younger than she had in years. The stress lines that used to bracket her mouth whenever I walked into a room were gone, until she saw me. The moment her eyes landed on me, the tension returned. Her shoulders went up. Her expression hardened into the deposition face she had developed during our divorce proceedings. "Robert," she said. She didn't open the screen door. "I thought I told you to rest." "I can't rest," I said. "I have too much to clean up. If you're looking for the kids, Sophie told me you saw her, and Leo texted me with something about a truck." She crossed her arms. "You're working fast. Typical. Closing the deal." "May I come in, Linda, please? 10 minutes." She hesitated, her hand tightening on the door handle. She was weighing the risk. She knew me as a bulldozer. She was wondering if letting me in meant letting chaos back into her peaceful life. 10 minutes, she said. "Then I have a book club coming over." She unlocked the screen door. The inside of her house smelled like vanilla and old books. It was cluttered and comfortable. I saw photos of the kids on the mantel, recent ones, smiling, happy. I wasn't in any of them. I sat on the edge of a floral sofa. She sat in an armchair opposite me, perched on the edge, ready to spring up and kick me out. "I resigned," I said. "I heard," she nodded. "Reynolds called me. She thinks you've lost your mind. She wanted to know if I had power of attorney to commit you." "I haven't lost my mind," I said, looking at my hands. "I found it." Linda sighed, a sound of deep impatience. "Robert, look, I'm glad you survived, really. I don't want the father of my children dead, but I can't do this epiphany, Robert. I spent 20 years waiting for you to change. I mourned our marriage while we were still in it. I'm done. I'm happy now." "I know," I said softly. "I can see that, and I didn't come here to ask for you back." That stopped her. Her eyebrows knitted together. "You didn't?" "No, I forfeited that right a long time ago." I looked her in the eye. "I came to tell you what I felt in the courtroom." She looked away. "I don't want to talk about the divorce." "Not the legal part," I pressed. "The feeling. When I died, I went back there to the final hearing." I took a shaky breath. This was the hardest part. "I was inside you, Linda." She stared at me, her face unreadable. "I felt the moment the judge banged the gavel," I whispered. I was celebrating in my head. I thought I had won because I kept the portfolio. But inside you, I felt like I was drowning. I felt the humiliation of sitting across from the man you had built a life with, watching him treat you like a hostile witness. Linda's eyes began to shine. She gripped the arms of the chair. "I felt how tired you were," I continued. "Not just sleepy, soul-tired. You didn't want the alimony, you just wanted to be seen. You wanted the man you married to acknowledge that you existed, and I looked right through you." A single tear tracked down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. "I felt the grief, Linda. It wasn't anger, it was just sadness. You were mourning me while I was sitting 3 feet away from you." I leaned forward, my voice cracking. "I am so sorry. I robbed you of a partner. I made you a widow 20 years before I actually died." The room was silent. The only sound was the ticking of a clock on the wall. Linda stood up. She walked to the window and looked out at the street. Her back was to me. I saw her shoulders shaking. You were a monster that day, she said, her voice thick. I know. You made me feel so small. I know. She turned around. Her face was wet, flushed with emotions she had packed away in boxes months ago. Why now, Robert? She cried out. Why did it take death? Why wasn't my love enough? Why wasn't the kids' pain enough? Why did you have to literally die to understand that you were hurting us? Because I was blind, I said simply. And I was arrogant, and I thought providing money was the same as providing love. She looked at me, really studied me. She saw the man stripped of his armor, no suit, no tie, no confident smirk, just a sick, aging man with a cane and a broken heart. You can't fix this, she said, wiping her face with her sleeve. We aren't getting back together, Robert. I'm finally breathing again. I can't go back into the cave. I'm not asking you to, I said. I stood up, relying heavily on the cane. I just wanted you to know that I felt it, and that you were right. You were right about everything. I moved toward the door. I'll go. Enjoy your book club. I reached for the handle. Robert? I stopped. Leo needs a truck, she said. Her voice was steady again, but softer. But he also needs a dad who listens. Don't just move the boxes. Ask him about the paintings. Ask him why he uses so much blue. I turned back and nodded. I will. And Sophie, she added. She pretends to be tough, but she calls me every time you leave. She's scared you're going to die again. She needs reassurance, not money. I'll be there next week, I promised. Same time, same coffee shop. Linda looked at me for a long moment. There was no love in her eyes, that was gone, but the hate was gone too. It was replaced by something else. Pity? Maybe just peace. Goodbye, Robert, she said. Goodbye, Linda. I walked out to the sidewalk. The winter wind was still cold, but the sun was breaking through the grey clouds above Lake Michigan. I had no job. My wife was gone, my health was fragile. I was living in a hotel until I could find a small apartment. But as I walked down the street, feeling the pavement under my feet and the air in my lungs, I realized something profound. I wasn't the titan of industry anymore. I wasn't the man in the penthouse. I was just Robert, and for the first time in 52 years, that was enough to start with. I took out my phone. I didn't check the stock market. I opened a text to Leo. Got the truck. See you Tuesday. I want to hear about the blue paint. I hit send.